All right, greetings everybody, and welcome to week number 14. That is right, week number 14. That is 5, that is 10, and that is 4. Week number 14 of your 9489 class, which is your cultural heritage class. As always, I'm your professor, Dr. Jace K. Alston, and what we are going to do today is a quick state of the course update, and I do mean quick because there's not much to go over with the course. It's almost done. And then I am going to say a few things just about our topic this week, food. Because there are some things about food that you as librarians should probably just kind of be aware of, keep tucked in the back of your mind. And this isn't stuff that you normally hear in library school, but again, I've been doing this for so long, and libraries were literally the only thing I had going in my life for a long time. So I have picked up a few nuances that I will share that a lot of professors just probably wouldn't share. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into food as cultural here. No. Let's get into that state of the course update first. Sorry, what is Dr. Jace doing? Okay. All right. So first of all, with state of the course update, basically pretty much things are done. So you, again, like I think I mentioned last week, you have your position papers that are going to be due on May the 10th. There will be a final check-in video next week, but a week from this Sunday is the 3rd, and then after this week will be the 10th. Your position paper, which would be your final paper, is going to be due on the 10th, or if you did a heritage project, then you need to get that documentation to me by the 10th or slightly after. But I've got to have grades turned in at a certain time, so don't make it too far after. But you do have the next few days to get those things in and going. But what I do want to recommend is, even though our topic this week is food, I do want to recommend that if you can work ahead, maybe do work ahead. So what I hate is that our final next week, our final module is the week 15 module, which is not due on Sunday. It's actually due on Friday, May the 8th, because again, the semester kind of ends on May the 8th. But I can have exams after the semester ends. That's why this final paper, which counts basically as an exam, that's why that's due on the 10th instead of the 8th. Anyway, this final discussion board is due on the 8th, but what I want to say is it is still a very important topic. Forgotten heritage is absolutely an important topic, and I see Matthew has already worked ahead. I would love for you all to get started on this week if at all possible. That's definitely not a requirement, but if you get started on it this week instead of next week, that will give you the opportunity to spend more time interacting with and understanding and digesting that content as well. And Forgotten Heritage, I hate this. I still have not figured out which module to actually end the course on, because Forgotten Heritage really should be within the mix of the content during the end part of the semester, and not it shouldn't be the bookend thing. But I can't figure out what to move to the end of the semester if I were to move Forgotten Heritage earlier into the course. There's certainly things you can't end on because you don't want to end on that type of a note. Like you wouldn't want to end on women and cultural heritage, because that's something that needs to be kind of thought of, at full force, not when you're also thinking of exams. You can't end on Confederate commemoration because it's just kind of a low point to end on. You can't end on this. I had thought about moving the cemeteries to the last week, and then I was like, well, that's kind of morbid. When the course is over, we're going to talk about cemeteries. That didn't work. So I don't really know what to end the course on, and so this has remained the ending. I thought about switching this with food, but the thing is, people get so exhausted after the 2 modules before food, the women and cultural heritage, because it's such a heavy topic because of the injustices there. And then the Confederate commemoration thing, people are so exhausted after both of those things that you have to make food week 14 because people are exhausted with what happened in the weeks prior to that. So I don't really know what to do there, but this is a very important topic. And so if you can start this topic a little bit earlier, I don't see the harm in doing that. I think that could actually potentially be a good thing. Okay. All right. So there's that. And that is pretty much it for the state of the course update. I'm working hard on trying to get things graded in my other classes. So I apologize that your 4 Heritages papers still haven't been graded yet, but you all have turned in a paper. So you've gotten feedback on a paper as far as the heritage site visit. So the same feedback that I gave in the heritage site visit paper, that would apply to making sure you do this final paper correctly as well if you decided not to do the heritage project offer. So there you have it with that. If you have any questions, just reach out to me, basically. And that's always the case. That's been the case the entire semester, and that continues to be the case now. Okay, so reach out if you need to. That is it for the course update. Let's go ahead and talk about food and why that's important. Give me one moment. Okay, so here is why food is always important. So food is important as a cultural heritage thing and something to be aware of because it's something that fuels so many unique aspects of any locale. So no matter where you go in the United States, and probably no matter where you go in the entire world where humans live, there are going to be food traditions, there are going to be local things that are associated, local foods that are associated with the heritage and history of that place. And there are going to be, quite frankly, food becomes part of the identity of a lot of local places as well. And then also a lot of times, and we had our business module earlier in the semester, but another thing that happens oftentimes is almost no matter where you go, there are local eateries that are very much celebrated, that have very much interwoven themselves into the culture and into the fabric of any local locale. So when you take all of those things together, food becomes a big deal. But food is also very good for when it comes to programming. If you're looking for programming ideas, and we think about this mostly at the public library, but this comes into play at the academic library too. When you're thinking about programming ideas, programs centered on food tend to be a hit, especially if you can get those things to have a little sampling or catering or something like that. Those things can definitely be a hit. And so, yeah, when you are looking for programming ideas, programming around local foods, if you're in the public library, or even the academic library, again, those things tend to be very popular. They tend to draw people into the library. They tend to get people to say, oh, this is neat. And this is a lot of times you can get first time attendees to a library program based on the programming for food. And that's actually a good thing. People come to that first time programming and they're like, oh, wow, the library does this. This is pretty cool. Well, now I want to come back to the library to see some other programming because I know that the library does cool programming. And that is a great way for outreach, okay? That is a great aspect for outreach. Now, of course, heritage implications when it comes to food, those are very big, and those are things that get talked about in edible identities. Also, you have the Black Cake excerpt. Even if you don't use that Black Cake prompt, I still recommend you watch that little excerpt. It's about 3 minutes long, and it does talk about how there's cultural erasure that's basically talked about like that, and whitewashing of culture, because yes, it's complex. There is a lot of foods, as I think I've mentioned earlier this semester, a lot of foods just kind of get, I'll say, food traditions depend on people's migratory patterns and migratory habits. You're not going to have the food presence in the United States, for instance, that you do if you don't have various people coming in and influencing food culture here. And I know this might be a silly example, but one example of something that I can think of off the top of my head is a blending of a food fusion, if you will, because that's the term that a lot of people use. A food fusion of chicken and waffles and I believe it's chicken marsala. But it's an Indian type of chicken, and what they're doing, there are several restaurants now that serve this. So this is a blending of African American culture and Indian, as in South Asian Indian cultures, where they do the chicken and waffle setup, the classic chicken and waffle setup. That now there are various accounts as to the origin of chicken and waffles. Some people say it's African American in origin, and then other people say it's New England Puritan in origin, up in like the Vermont, Maine type of area. There's probably a bit of truth in both, but I know the history behind the African American story of chicken and waffles. Anyway, they've combined that, but instead of using the usually fried chicken that's used in the African American culture, there are restaurants now that are using chicken-based dishes that use Indian spices and Indian tradition, and they're combining that with waffles and still using syrup, and combining those into a thing, and it's a fusion between these two very distinct cultures. I don't know exactly what subculture within India that comes from, but it's certainly Indian culture for these things like chicken marsala and these other types of things, and they're blending that with African American culture, and it's really good. I really love it. So having said that, we wouldn't have those types of food presences if we didn't have the immigration that we have in this country. So migratory patterns definitely influence food and make food better, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's one of many reasons why there should always be a multicultural presence in this country. But another thing that I would encourage you all to keep in mind, just on a practical aspect when it comes to librarianship, is some of you are going to be working for state associations, right? Some of you are going to do things like conference planning. You're going to do things like attend conferences in different states and different cities and that sort of thing. And so when you're doing that sort of thing, one thing that will increase the viability of your conference and make people want to come to your conference more likely is if you have a good food presence there. Okay, so excuse me one moment. All right, yeah, sorry, I'm back. Okay, so yes, when it comes to food presence, yes, one thing that will make a conference more viable is if you are able to cater. Well, you have to cater conferences anyway, otherwise people aren't going to come. But you have to cater some programs and have food options on site for a lot of different things. But getting beyond that, one way to make your conference more viable is when people go to different cities, they want to try the food of that city. So when people are coming to Kansas City, they do want to sample Kansas City barbecue. When people are going to St. Louis, they want to sample that toasted ravioli. When people go to Chicago, they want to sample Chicago-based sausages and pizzas and that sort of thing, so forth and so on, depending on where you go. So one way to make your conference more viable is to have good food options there. And that's one thing that these conferences, as you all will see as you go through your library careers, one thing that they're designed to do is to make a bit of extra money for the associations that host them and that sort of thing. So you have to have awareness of food, among other things, in order to have a successful conference, okay? So just putting that out there, that's practical knowledge that, again, that's one of those things that they don't teach us that in library school. Well, Dr. Jace wants your experience at Mizzou to be viable because you could have went anywhere, but you selected us, so I want to reward you for selecting us. And so one thing I try to do is tell you some things that you wouldn't get anywhere else. If I can make this program a little unique, a little special, then that allows for you to say, hey, I'm glad I went to Mizzou because I got some things there that I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. That's one of my goals. That's also why I do the check-in videos. You'd be surprised at how many programs these days don't have a lecture component or anything. They just have you open up a Canvas course and just kind of go. But I want your experience to be a little deeper than that. So there we go. But that's all we need for this week. So I am finally, for once, keeping it under 15 minutes. Let's not look that gift horse in the mouth. Let's cut it off here. I am Dr. Jace, and people want to know about the food of a particular place. Jace Place got my rhyme. I'm going to go ahead and get back to grading, but I have enjoyed you all this semester, and we'll have our last check-in video next week. Till then, later.